My name is Steve Waters and I'm the Director of the Teach Well Alliance and the Principal Partner of the School Mental Health Group. It's the beginning of the school year 2019-20 and I'm delighted to be at Three Bridges Primary School in Southall to interview Jeremy Hannay, the head teacher. Jeremy's kindly offered to tell us how at Three Bridges he's rejected much of the conventional wisdom of how to lead a school and relate to his staff. So I'd like to just start by asking you, Jeremy, how would you describe Three Bridges to people who haven't visited the school?
It's a very good question. How would I describe it? I guess the truth is I probably wouldn't describe it any differently than most head teachers describe their schools. I would say it's a school that is academically rich. I think that the children come away from our school, being able to do the core skills, reading, writing, and solving problems quite strongly. But I would also say that there is a much larger part to what we do here. A big part of our curriculum is around adventure. The children here are not just learning to read, write, and solve problems. They're canoeing and kayaking, learn teamwork and resilience and self-direction. They have a forest school, so they're learning to build fires and use handheld tools. But I think at the core of all of this, there's lots of things that we can say as teachers about our schools. The great things, the things we're working on. And I can recite to you my school development plan or my self-evaluation of how I think things are going. I can tell you that we're the happiest school on earth and brand us, as we have ourselves in the past. But I guess when people ask me, maybe what's different about Three Bridges or how it is that maybe things are slightly unique here, I would say that there is a really heavy focus on ensuring that the adults in the building are well taken care of. And that goes against the grain, I think, of some of my colleagues perhaps. Because lots of my colleagues are saying, we've got to put pupils first, put the children first. That's got to be at the center of all decision making. And I don't want anyone to think that that's what I'm suggesting is a counter to that message. My belief and my experience is that I guess it's simply put like this. There is no pupil well-being, there is no pupil achievement, there is no pupil collaboration, there is no pupil collective responsibility, there is no pupil anything until the adults have experienced that first. I think to me, it's quite a simple equation. If we're not putting our adults in a soil that is nutrient-rich, that will allow them to flourish into whomever they want to be as an educator, they have no chance of doing that effectively and sustainably in a classroom with children. Because sometimes, very often as a child, you have to watch somebody love something before you can learn to love it yourself, like they're showing you the way. And that is an ingredient, that is a nutrient that gets overlooked in many schools. That we need to make sure as leaders that we take care of the people who take care of our people. It's a crucial element.
So it reminds me of a Richard Branson saying that employees don't look after the clients, they look after their employees, mm-hmm. and the employees look after the clients.
Yeah, I think it's quite a similar philosophy. And at our school, a school that is daring to be different. I've just come out of a training session where we're looking at decolonizing our curriculum and how it is we present the information of the world to our children, what it is we're telling them or not telling them, and what it is in the past we've said or not said. We're a school that is daring to be different in the best interest of our children. But in order for us to be the very best we can be, our adults need to be the very best they can be. I don't think it's don't think is a complex equation. But unfortunately, the narrative in our country right now is not that.
Sure.
It's not that.
Could you explain what you did when you first took the headship at Three Bridges?
Well, I've been at Three Bridges for 8 years. I've been here quite a long time, and I've had a number of different roles at the school. And the work that we've been doing, building a culture around the development of staff, the support of staff, the well-being of staff, started before I was a head teacher here. And it really meant interrogating all of the pieces of the school that we, things that we had always done. There's a poster somewhere in my office here that has that phrase on it. The most dangerous phrase in our language is, we've always done it that way.
Yeah, I was reading it on the wall before you came.
So it was really about asking why. Why are we marking for 4 hours a night, for children sometimes who can't read what it is you're writing? And is that the most effective way of communicating? Is that the best way to give feedback? We looked at collective responsibility and collaborative design. So taking care of the instructional program. When I started at Three Bridges, the achievement of the children was not great. It was poor. And there were lots of reasons for that at the time. I think that there wasn't a lot of consistency or rigor around the instructional program. It hadn't been clearly disseminated or collaboratively decided. So it was really about taking the bits and pieces that I thought would get the monkeys off of our back and dealing with those things first. So we redesigned, as a collaborative, our instructional programs. And what I mean by that is that I think the school was used to someone coming in and saying, we're going to do this, and I'll be in next week to check that you're doing it, and then I'm going to take a look at your books and your planning to make sure it's to the standard I want, and then that's how I'm going to know you're doing it. And I grew up in a system that does not behave that way, and understand that if you want long-term sustainable impact, you can't treat people that way. So I guess those were the first changes. It was really about interrogating how it was we were going to change. Was it going to be through management practices, or was it going to be through leadership? And that is, I think, for me, that's something that it has become a real challenge in our system in the last decade, that we are dressing up management as leadership, and it's not. So monitoring and scrutinizing and holding people to account and observing lessons and grading things, scrutinizing books, scrutinizing planning, making people submit things a week in advance, all of that sort of stuff, like those are management practices. And I'm not suggesting that there is no place for management in schools. Management helps systems run effectively, organizations run smoothly. But we can't dress it up as leadership, because it's not. It's a part of effective leadership, but it is not the whole piece. And so I think what I tried to do was build our social capital, really put teachers in situations where they were talking effectively and directly about learners and learning, so that it wasn't just meaningless meetings, they were purposeful, and that the decisions that they were making in those meetings about instruction, they were immediately putting into practice, and then they had an opportunity to come back and say whether or not it was working. And so that's how we constructed our instructional programs. Not, I'm telling you what to do and I'm going to make sure you're doing it, but let's look at what research says is high quality instruction. Let's go give it a try. Let's go away and have a play. Let's come back and decide collaboratively on what works in our school, in our context, and what's not working. And when things are not working, let's support each other in making those things better. So those, I think, were the initial seeds planted to help Three Bridges grow into the collaborative success, perhaps, that it is today.
You've described how you lead the school as another way. Could you explain what that phrase means to you in terms of your everyday leadership?
Sure. So, over time, I've eliminated virtually every overt, invasive, interrogative management practice and replaced it with leadership. And that's at every level, not just for me. I would say actually today, very rarely for me, that the purpose of doing a lot of this was to create a self-sustaining school, to be a leader who's uncovering a leader, the hero leader paradigm is one that's been proven as a failure over and over again. So what is the other way? Well, I think the other way is looking at why, what it is we're doing and why we're doing it, and then moving those practices as far away from us as possible and replacing them with things like lesson and learning study, with teacher research groups, with collective responsibility, with decisional capital, giving teachers the opportunity not only to study learners and learning, but then enact decisions that make a difference in the lives of their children. I think it's really been about also identifying what management practices are requisite. What is it that we need to do to ensure that the organization runs smoothly and things are improving? And how is it that we're gauging those things? But enacting those, the decisions, the determinations from those management practices in the most humane and the most ethical way possible. So observation is a common one. So you hear of schools where teachers are being observed 6 times a year. They're being given a feedback sheet that's coming from someone who is hierarchically above them. And when you ask why that is, why is it that you're observing teachers, often people say, well, it's about consistencies, or it's about practice. We want to make sure that the practice is good enough. Or it's about compliance. We want to make sure they're doing what we've said is best practice in our school. And I don't think anybody would argue that there's a problem with having consistencies in a school. I think most teachers would say that that's a positive thing. I don't think that there would be teachers who would say that high quality practice is something that's a bad thing. I think all teachers inherently want to be their very, very best. So leadership, I think, is at its heart about influence. So if what we want are consistencies, or we want high quality practice, or we want professional people who are growing to be better professionals than they were last week or last month or last year, then it's really about asking, well, under what conditions can we facilitate that happening without putting them under pressure, without making it high stakes, without making them feel like there's a gun to their head? How can we put them in the right soil? So at Three Bridges, those are the kinds of questions that we asked ourselves. What are the conditions that are necessary for professional people to take responsibility for their own learning, teacher-led learning? And what happens when you pull away the observation and you input something like micro-research or lines of inquiry for professional growth is you see development take off. Because, someone once said to me, you can mandate mediocrity, but you can only unleash greatness. And that's what's happened here. As a leader, I want the teachers in the school to be a better teacher than I was. I want them one day to be a better leader than I am. It's like, being a parent. You want your children to have better opportunities and have a better life than you had. Well, as a school leader, you should wish the same thing for your staff. I want the teachers here to be the very, very best they can be. The teachers in this school today are better teachers than I was. That's how I know I'm doing the right thing. They're self-regulating, they're inquisitive, they never ever settle. They always want to be better. A healthy dose of self-improvement. But it's because they're leading it on things that they're passionate about. They're able to reflect now without pressure and say, I'm struggling here, and I've heard that you're doing some cool stuff with that. Can you help? And so it's a culture now of self-referral. when someone's struggling or someone's uncertain. It's a culture of collaborative development. So the reception teacher is working with the year 3 teacher to improve. It's about collective responsibility. Nobody at Three Bridges is a classroom teacher. They're school teachers. We here are the stewards of all of our children. There's no sense at Three Bridges being a great teacher if the teacher down the hall is struggling. And those mantras, those beliefs are what fuel the progression here.
It might actually touch on or be integral to the next question I've got, which is that I've noticed increasingly, perhaps over the last 6 months in particular, on Twitter, a debate, sometimes not framed in the best respectful terms, between progressivism and traditionalism.
Sure.
And I just wonder whether your view of leadership in this school has something to say about that debate.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my view is that there is a time and a place for virtually everything. And I think that anybody who believes that there is one way of doing everything is an idiot. You know, as polite as I possibly can be. I mean, in our school, when we teach phonics, it is direct instruction. It is a scripted lesson. There is no fluff or bells and whistles. It is a very, very direct instruction, scripted program, and it is incredible. I would never, until I find something that is more incredible than that, this will be what we do. There is nothing better in my mind. I have never seen children learn to read as joyfully and quickly as they do with the way we teach phonics. But we don't teach maths that way. And I think that that's where people get, where they struggle. They get hung up on one way. You know, this is the way that it should always be done. It should always be teacher, telling, showing, working with the children, and then they produce on their own. And there are times, there are contexts, there are pupils, there are lessons, there are subjects that perhaps facilitate that as the best way in that time. But it's not always that way. And I guess I have the joy of not feeling hamstrung to any particular, traditional belief or progressive belief. My belief is that based on the children, the context, the subject, the pupil, there are factors that you need to consider. And are there times when sitting in rows is really effective? Absolutely there are. Are there times when having a conversation at a table that perhaps has got a Kagan model seating to it? Absolutely there is. But I think here, what I try and do as a leader is be far less prescriptive. That, teachers aren't hemorrhaging out of our profession because of, what we're calling workload, marking, planning, admin. They're not hemorrhaging out because they're marking too much or planning too much. I have no doubt that there would be people who say, I left because there were 5 hours of marking night and that was a crazy thing. I don't doubt that that exists, but I guess my point is that what I try and do here is give people the opportunity to develop, to reflect, to research, to be critical of their own practice, and be involved in coaching conversations that further that. But I give them the agency and the autonomy to make decisions that affect their own practice. So, we don't have a marking policy here. There's no pro forma that they need to complete or codes that they need to use. They get to choose. If they think that, writing a paragraph in a pupil's book is going to be right for that child in that day and that lesson, then they do it. And if they don't, then they won't. And I think that's why people are hemorrhaging out of this profession. Because we've taken a group of university graduates who are inspired and passionate and intelligent and budding professionals and put them in an environment where we're telling them what to do at every single turn. You need to mark this way. You need to plan this way. You need to teach this way. The kids need to sit this way. And and we've over-engineered schools. We've over-managed them. And I think that's where I go back to this piece about leadership. Our job as leaders is to influence change. And that's by putting teachers in the conditions under which change and teacher-led learning is possible. So it's not teachers just get to make random decisions whenever they want about anything. The teachers here are researchers. They're collaborators, they're studiers, they're put in an environment where they are able to make decisions that are right for them and for learners. So it's not a free-for-all, but they get to choose because they're put in the environment where they're able to make the very best choices.
Before the summer break, you had an Ofsted inspection, and if I can reinterpret what you've just said, is it the case that the outstanding judgment will enable you to challenge the narrative that in order to get outstanding, you need to have a high accountability culture in a school?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a much more succinct way of putting it. So
Because what I'm wondering is whether some leaders would have said, well, because you referred to the good judgment.
Yes.
And when they said, oh, well, that's all very well, but you're only good. And I wonder if some leaders would say, yes, well, sounds all very nice, but wait till Ofsted come, and what's going to happen then?
That's right.
Now it's happened,
yes,
and there's been nothing but outstanding in that report.
Absolutely.
That sends a message back that actually, your phrase, there is another way.
And let's focus on that, because I think that is at the heart of exactly what I'm talking about, and I've waffled on about nothing. So, I think that's exactly it. The badge that they have now given our school, very rightfully so, very well deserved. This staff is incredible. Nobody is working harder than the people here. That badge is the same badge I will use to dismantle the view that the only way you can have an outstanding school is high stakes, scrutiny, monitoring, observation. That is a lie. It's not the truth. It is what, as a head teacher, you're told. If you speak to the local authority, you speak to an HMI, you speak to a consultant. If you're a new head teacher, if you're a head teacher that's experienced in a school that's good, they're telling you, this is how you gain an outstanding rating. You monitor more, you scrutinize more, you hold people to a higher account. That is a flawed narrative. It is the narrative that is destroying our schools and our teachers and ultimately our children. And that is the narrative that I'm going to dismantle. And it started when I first came to this country. As an immigrant from Canada, came here, and what I was told in the very first part of my time here was, listen, Jeremy, if you don't like the way we do things here, fuck off back to Canada. Whoa. And then the narrative, shifts to, listen, you're going to have one of two types of schools, Jeremy. You can have a happy school. You can treat your staff well, give them freedom, be a little bit lax with them, but you're never going to get the results. You need to monitor, you need to scrutinize. That's what's going to tip them over the edge. Or you can run a tight ship. You can monitor, scrutinize, push, pull. You can hold everybody to a high account. Pupil progress meetings every 6 weeks, observations every 6 weeks, constant feedback. That's how they grow. That's how you get an outstanding school. So you can run a happy school, but it's not going to be Ofsted successful. Or you can run a school like this, and you will get the badge you need, and life will be good for you. And that, not only is it a lie, not only is it completely untrue, the reverse is true. That while you may get recognized with a badge from Ofsted because you behaved that way, I guess what people are not seeing, because it's very challenging to see because it's been this way for so long, it's the opportunity cost. What we're not seeing is who our professionals can become when they're not constantly monitored, measured, and scrutinized. When people have a gun to their head, they behave strangely. They make rash decisions. They panic. They're filled with anxiety, stress, fear. You're not making good decisions then. You're not flourishing. You're not growing into the very best version of yourself. You're definitely not helping other people do that. And so what I'm suggesting is that there is a better way. That you can get the fancy badge if that matters to you. But you can actually grow better teachers, better leaders, and ultimately have a much stronger experience for the children. And I think as a school now, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about curriculum, and we have been for a number of years. But it comes in many forms. And I think what happens is in schools that are very compliance-oriented, very militaristic, very much about scrutiny and observation, curriculum to them is content.
Mm.
What is it that we're specifically teaching and when? And that is a part of curriculum building. But there's a much bigger piece to it than that. And that is about the hidden curriculum. And when I say hidden curriculum, I mean a number of things. But the things that I think are important right now are, what is the pedagogy? And how does the pedagogy align with your curriculum? Because at our school, we're talking about global citizenship. We're talking about sustainable development, social justice and equity, power and governance. Themes that are bold, propelling our children into the 21st century. But if your pedagogy is, I'm the fountain of knowledge at the front of the classroom, and you are a receptacle to be filled, how does that align with equality? How does that align with social justice? I mean, that's where I think I lose track. And if our teachers, if in a school we want children collaborating, we want children connecting, we want children inquiring, we want them to see the relationship between themselves and the professional in the presence of knowledge as one that is not hierarchical, but horizontal, where that exchange is learners learning and learners teaching, and teachers learning and teachers teaching. If that's what we're trying to do, surely our adults have to be in that same environment first. They must be exposed to those same principles, those same practices, that same leadership pedagogy as we want the children to experience. And you cannot have that in a system that is very, very much compliance-oriented. You can't. It's not possible.
If you...
Losing my voice.
No problem.
If you had one piece of advice that you could give a head teacher coming into a new school,
Yeah.
what would that advice be?
Disrupt. Be a positive disruptor. I wish I made that up. That's jazz and pop
Oh, right, yeah.
But that be it, just because everybody else is doing it, just because you've been told by somebody that this is the way that it has to be, it's the only way. Disrupt. Be a positive disruptor. Be somebody who is looking for solutions that aren't immediately apparent. Dig more deeply. Think about the wider picture. Think about the long look. But disrupt.
And last question. If you project into, say, 3 years' time, where would you like Three Bridges to be in 3 years' time?
Wow. Well, I think ultimately I would like Three Bridges to be a beacon of hope. And I want Three Bridges to be, along with some other really, really incredible schools, leading the revolution in schools in this country. Not on any level that we should be kind of colonial and copied. But Three Bridges is Three Bridges because of a number of factors. This community is incredible. The people here are amazing. The staff here are unique and developed in their own ways. You could never recreate Three Bridges anywhere else. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a piece of music here that can be played somewhere else. I think that for me is why I stay. I mean, it would be easy to go back to Ontario, be the principal of a school about the same size as this, in the Ontario system where there's no Ofsted, there's no SATs, there's no high stakes accountability, there's no nonsense, professionals are respected and paid well, cost of living is lower, there's a lot of factors, pension is earlier, there's a lot of factors to draw you back. But this is why I stay. Because I believe that Three Bridges has found a number of steps in the right direction. And we are learning all the time from other schools as well about more steps in that direction. But Three Bridges is going to lead a revolution. It is going to be the school that we're going to look back on in 20, 30 years and say, that's one of the places where this started. That the environment that we have in schools today is as a result of the work that was going on 25 years ago at Three Bridges, when they said,